Today on Greater Podcast, we're talking to Steven Schapera, who's a mega entrepreneur in London. How are you, Steven?
Good, thank you.
So just to start us off, can you tell us a bit about yourself and how you first got started into the world of entrepreneurship?
Well, I guess one of the things we've got to do to answer that question, we've got to say, what do we mean by entrepreneurship?
Exactly.
And I don't know the exact answer. It's a word which is bandied about a lot. Personally, I don't. It's not a word that I particularly like. So in anticipation of this question, I took the liberty to do some Google, and I came up with what I thought was a pretty good explanation. It said. Entrepreneurship is the creation or extraction of economic value. With this definition, entrepreneurship is viewed as change, generally entailing risk beyond what is normally encountered in starting a business. Now, that really resonates with me because the first thing is that an entrepreneur in the pursuit of entrepreneurship, if that's the correct terminology, has a desire to extract and create value. So that's the first thing. And I'm a great one for using metaphors. It's kind of like making a cup of tea, you know? Yeah. You extract the tea from the tea bag. Some people will see a tea bag and they won't make a tea, and other people will. So that's the first thing. And the second part of it is the taking the risk. Yeah. So now I'll answer your question. So I grew up in a family. I grew up in Sea Point in Cape Town. My dad was a fisherman. My mom worked in a travel agency, and compared to many other South Africans, we were pretty well off, I guess. But compared to their social circle, they certainly weren't well off. They both worked. My sister and I went to, government schools. But we grew up in a culture where the conversation around the dinner table was usually about business because, my dad would say what he did that day and my mom would say what she did that day. Yeah. So I was surrounded by that. And I guess because of that, from a very early age, I knew that I wanted to be in a business. And so that was, I suppose, the roots of my entrepreneurship. And then also I happened to be fairly good with my hands. So I like building things. And I think whether you like building go-karts or building a better bicycle, part of that is a desire for change. And change feeds into what drives an entrepreneur as well. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of...
No, 100%. So,
answer to the first question.
Yeah, you mentioned your environment. I mean, how did your environment influence your drive to becoming successful?
Yeah. So Ben, the world has changed a lot since I was a kid. I'm 63 years old. So the world has changed a lot since I was a kid. But when I was, I'm guessing here, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, sort of those 5 years, there was actually a magazine that used to come out every Wednesday. I think it was every Wednesday. Maybe it was not every week, but I'm pretty sure it was on a Wednesday. I used to get excited on Tuesday night, for this magazine that came out on the Wednesday. And it was available from a store in Cape Town in Sea Point called CNA, all right? And every week, my mum would bring me this magazine. And the magazine was called Tell Me Why. And the reason why I mention this is you ask about environment. I grew up in an environment where I was encouraged to ask why. My nickname when I was a kid, in the family was why, because everything I'd ask why. And I don't even know if it's still a saying in South Africa. Why is a crook? The answer would be because Y is a crooked letter and you can't make it straight. But I used to ask why for everything. So I sort of just grew up in this environment of curiosity, of being encouraged to question things, encouraged to ask why. I was never in an environment where I sort of was encouraged not to ask why. And that's why, looking back on it, I can see now why my mom kept bringing me this magazine. She was encouraging that curiosity.
Yeah. So you think one of the key aspects of an entrepreneur is to ask why you're doing stuff and actually go into it?
Unquestionably. If you were to say to me, list some of the compelling characteristics that you have, which have helped you along the way, I would say without any question, it's curiosity. Because curiosity is what makes you look under a stone for an opportunity.
Yeah.
I mean, most people just keep walking. And the curious idiot kicks the stone up to see what's underneath, finds there's an insect there, looks to see what was the insect doing there in the dark. Was it eating?
Yeah.
What, and that then leads on to something. So absolutely, curiosity.
And the more curious you become, obviously, the more you look for opportunities, the more opportunities you take, the more businesses you build. Is that the constant cycle that you follow?
I think the more curious you are, the more opportunities you identify, and then you need some other characteristics to pursue those opportunities. I mean, lots of people are faced with the same opportunities, but not everybody has the ability to execute on the opportunity. And the other thing, and it's not my words, I think it was Ralph Waldo Emerson or somebody who said, the future belongs to those who see opportunity before they become obvious. That's also very important in entrepreneurship or an entrepreneurial mindset, is to think of an opportunity before it's an obvious one.
Yeah. So I'm going to go back. You mentioned the certain traits that entrepreneurs need. What are some other vital traits that people might need to become a mega entrepreneur or someone successful?
Look, the first thing you need is integrity. Because if you haven't got integrity, you're never going to develop the right relationships with people. And if you can't develop the right relationships with people, then you're not going to be able to execute on your idea. You're not going to be able to raise funds. You're not going to be able to build a team. You're not going to be able to find a partner. So I think the starting point has to be adhering to a high level of ethic and integrity. That's the first thing. The second thing would be, well, we've discussed curiosity, obviously, but that comes after. The second thing would be dealing with adversity. Everybody focuses on your IQ for intelligence, and then it became fashionable to consider EQ, which was the emotional quotient. But it's the adversity. It's an individual's ability to deal with adversity, which I think is really what separates the men from the boys. And you'll find that ability to deal with adversity is expressed in many different ways. It might, in one way, it might be expressed by somebody who's dealt with an illness. Another one, it might be somebody who's had to deal with running out of cash. But there are others. You deal with adversity. If you're a marathon runner, you deal with adversity. That where you're running and you're just exhausted and you can't push yourself a little bit, but you manage to. That's also persistence and adversity. They kind of go hand in hand. So I think there's that. Being creative. I think one of the reasons I don't like the word entrepreneur is because there seems to be some connotation that it's sort of, you can fly by night. You can be successful and then not successful and still be labeled as entrepreneur. I rather look at it as people who create wealth, who build businesses, and for that reason, I think that you also have to have a creative mindset. You have to have vision. You have to be able to close your eyes and see something that other people haven't seen, or dream something that others haven't dreamed,
and then snatch that opportunity. Obviously, once they have it, So another huge aspect regarding success, I mean, from what I've seen, is failure. Now failure is one of those things where teenagers go through failure. Almost everyone fails at some point in their life, whether it be in an entrepreneurial sense, building a business, or just in their personal lives. How has failure played a role in you achieving your success?
Okay, so now you're sort of touching on some kind of attitudinal aspects of my thinking. Um, I need to complete the sentence in a hurry because if I don't, it's going to get misunderstood. I don't think I've failed.
You think you
Okay?
learned? Yeah.
No, I don't
Nice.
think I've failed. I think that if somebody falls over and breaks a leg, it's hard to say they failed. What happened was they had an accident. Something happened that they hadn't foreseen. They broke a leg. Yeah. Is it a disaster? Absolutely, it's a disaster. But it's not a failure to fall over. Um, when somebody gets into a difficult situation in their business, let's just say they run out of cash. I don't think that's a failure. I think it's a severe lesson.
Yeah.
And it's certainly undesirable, but there are often factors that contribute to that. I mean, if I was starting a business the day after Mr. Putin invaded Ukraine and my business went broke, did I fail? I don't know. So I don't really like to use the word failure in that context. What I can certainly tell you is that just in one of my businesses, which happens to be one that I was very successful in, a cosmetic business that we sold to Estée Lauder, we had at least 5 near-death experiences. At least 5 near-death experiences. And each one of them could be looked at by an onlooker and said, that those near-death experiences were failures. They were certainly errors of judgment. So in that context, they could appear to be a failure. But the fact of the matter is, we'd never done it before. I went into cosmetics from agriculture. I mean, women's makeup is a bit far from having your arm up the back of a cow. I mean, it's very, very different. So those near-death experiences were learning experiences. They weren't failures.
I mean, how do you do that? How do you switch from agriculture to such a different? I mean, how does that work?
Yeah, good question. Again, I think that it goes to a person's mindset and what intrigues them, and so on and so forth. I wouldn't say that I get bored quickly, because I don't. I mean, I was in agriculture for 20 years, and then I was in cosmetics for almost 20 years. So that by no means can one say that those are short-term interests, but it goes back to the curiosity, and so you could be fully immersed in, let's just say, the beauty business, the makeup business, as an example, but you might find growing a plant in your garden is interesting, and that might lead you into investing into a small agricultural project, which might lead into something else. It could be that agricultural project grows something which can be branded, and because of your knowledge of the beauty business and branding in beauty, you suddenly think, well, I can brand my watermelon, and so a lot of these skills are transferable. The fundamentals of building a business and creating wealth for everybody involved, the fundamentals are the same, whether it's a biotech, an agricultural enterprise, a branded cosmetic. The fundamentals are all the same.
Yeah. So I'm going to go back to the failure discussion. I'm going to rephrase the question as, what lessons have you learned through your past? Not mistakes. And like you said, for you, failure is seen as more of a lesson than anything, from what I've taken out of it.
Yeah. So probably one of the lessons that I've learned is really to try and when looking at opportunities, to understand. In order to make good decisions, you've got to gather a lot of information.
Yeah.
When you've gathered all the information, you're then hopefully fully informed. And on the basis of being fully informed, you're more likely to make a good decision than a bad one. So the first thing is, one of the lessons I've learned is gather all the information. I studied mechanical engineering at university. Did I learn about engineering? Yeah, probably. I've forgotten everything. But what I did learn was where to find information and how to digest it and how to assimilate that information. So, and it's one of the reasons why when I'm talking to people like you and they might ask me about, what should I study at university? I go, it really makes no difference. Really makes no difference, because what you're learning at university is how to learn. So we'll come back to that later, perhaps. But so lessons learned. Number one, when you see an opportunity, ask yourself the question, is this idea so brilliant that no one has ever thought about it before? That's a possibility, right? Or is the idea so stupid that a lot of people have thought about it before and that's why they haven't done it? So that's that's the two extremes, the left-hand side, the right-hand side. Then down the middle would come another alternative, another path, which is this idea very hard to execute on? And that's probably why it wasn't done. Yeah. And so when you look at great ideas like, I don't know, let's think of a great idea. I don't know, PayPal, Tesla. I'm just sort of thinking Elon Musk now. Let's just think of PayPal and Tesla. Well, either of them things that were so brilliant that no one could think of it? No, well, I mean, the idea of an electric car has been around for ages. Anyone can think of that idea. And PayPal, anyone can think of that idea. The thing is, it's really, really hard to execute on. And that's why he was so successful. He's a great executor. So that's one thing. Other lessons learned: when you're gathering the information, make sure the people you're gathering information from know what they're talking about. Yeah. I think it was Marcus Aurelius who said, if you ask 10,000 people for their advice is worth nothing if they don't know anything about the topic.
Yeah.
And that's very often the case. Is you'll find, people like me or you might go out with an idea and we might go and ask a whole lot of people, what do they think about this? And I don't know, a whole lot of people might poo-poo the idea, but you've got to make sure they know what they're talking about before you listen to the advice. So that's the second thing. Lessons learned. In business, lessons learned: first person you should ever hire is a finance person. Nobody does that because they think, I can't afford it. But a good finance person will save you more money than you pay them. But they're the ones who will stop you from running out of cash. And that's the biggest reason for failure in a business. So that took me many, many, many years to learn.
Yeah.
20 years it took me. First 20 years of my life, I could have done much more if I had the discipline to say, right, the first person I'm going to hire is a CFO.
You mentioned the fact that some businesses' ideas are too hard to execute for some people, and many not only teenagers, but I think adults at the same time almost have doubt and uncertainty. Have there ever been moments when you question your path or considered just giving up?
Yeah, look, that's kind of the marathon runner thing that we spoke about earlier. I could come out with some great story about, my father taught me never to give up. It's bullshit. I never got taught that at all.
Yeah.
I never got taught that at all. There's a fine balance between being extremely obstinate and not giving up, and being persistent and persevering and dealing with adversity and pushing yourself through the pain barrier and not giving up. And where you are on that spectrum, I don't know where that comes from. Again, maybe it comes from, I'm a huge believer in early the development of a child in the very early years. So whether it comes from the way the child is encouraged right in the beginning, as a 2 or 3 or 4 year old playing with toys and being told to don't do that, you'll break it, or don't do that, it'll hurt you, or whatever. I don't know. I can say hand on heart that I don't ever recall thinking this is too bloody hard, I'm going to give up.
Yeah. Oh, really?
No, it never came in. And probably part of that, just think, I've actually never thought of this before, but probably part of that was because I actually didn't have any choice. So all the businesses that I started with my own cash. And then when I thought that they were sort of getting some traction, or I thought that they were really, there was a real opportunity to do something, I went and convinced people around me, people in my network, that they should give me their cash to invest into my business.
Yeah.
And whether that was my sister or her husband or a friend of mine or my lawyer or my accountant or my uncle, two uncles, I took their money. So giving up would have been impossible for me, because if I gave up, the relationship that I would have with those people who were all close to me would have been fractured forever. So just thinking about it, that's probably why I was never I never had the luxury of being able to give up.
To give up. Exactly. And then comparing risk and playing it safe. I mean, there must be a fine line between the two, because I've had a lot of discussions with, I mean, my brother's in BU now, and he thinks playing it safe, study business, get a job. But my side is like completely the opposite. But is he too far on that side? Am I too far? I mean, where's the perfect spot where playing it safe and taking risks is good?
Okay, so again, this is something which is the sort of appetite for risk is something which, again, I'm convinced develops very early in a child.
Yeah.
So I remember going to school when I was at school, and I'm talking about being a very young child, 6, 7, 8, something like that. I remember always thinking, how does the goalkeeper, how is he able to dive like that? Because I don't want to dive. I think I'm going to get hurt if I dive like that, especially if you dive at somebody's feet. And then you look in rugby and you think, how's somebody able to tackle like that? Because I think I'm going to get hurt if I did that. So, I think risk is something, the appetite for risk, I think, is something which comes in early childhood development. But as an adult looking back, I would contextualize it differently. I have friends who have done skydiving. If you say to me, Stephen, would you do skydiving? I go, never in a million years would I do skydiving. It's way too risky. Now, for them, it's not risky at all. They understand skydiving. They've done the lessons. They know who packs the parachute. They know there's a safety cord or to pull out the safety thing. Risk is in the eye of the beholder. So I think the more you know, or the more information you have around something, the less risky it becomes. And certainly in business, I have found that I would be, people who know me well would identify me as someone who has quite a high risk appetite for risk.
Yeah.
If you ask me, do I have a high appetite for risk? I'd say, no, I have a healthy appetite for risk, and I don't regard myself as a gambler. But that's because I've spent a lot of time gathering the information.
Yeah. And when is the time to like cut a deal off or stop? When does it become too risky? I mean, have there ever been moments where you thought this is time where it's too risky, or this is time to back out of a deal, or this is time to sell a business? Have you ever had that thought?
Usually my mindset changes when I'm let down or disappointed by a person rather than a situation.
Yeah.
And when you look at almost all of the businesses that I've been involved in, almost all of them have been businesses where I became involved at a very, very early stage. So there were teams. There was either I had to put together a team, or maybe the team already existed. But I think usually my time to get out is when somebody on the team has disappointed me for some reason. Maybe it's an integrity reason, maybe it's an execution reason. But I'm pretty persistent, except with that stuff.
Yeah.
I won't persist with trying to change a person's behavior very much, because I'm just not convinced it's easy to do that. But I will persist with trying to change circumstances, external circumstances. Yeah, it's a good question. You know, your gut might tell you when to get out. I tend to, when I do get out, I tend to get out too late. I'm not
Oh,
somebody
really?
early. Yeah, yeah. Probably it's maybe even one of my
Weaknesses.
one of my failures, to use your um because I guess I'm too optimistic. I'm a glass half full
Yeah.
person. So I'm just always thinking, no, we'll, the economy will improve, interest rates will come down, or, we'll find somebody who'll want to invest or whatever. But when it's with people, no.
You can't deal with it. So you mentioned people, and in the business sector as a leader, what styles of leadership actually help you manage people or gain connections and all that sort of stuff? Because that's obviously a crucial part of success, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, I'm 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 a reasonably social person, so I enjoy the company of other people. I also enjoy my own company, but I enjoy the company of other people. I have a very good network of um, I have a very good network of people that I've worked with over the years or had interactions with over the years, and I try to work at maintaining those relationships, not because I think that there's um, some purpose to that sort of some economic purpose to that, but simply because I'm nostalgic. So if I did business with you in Taiwan in 1981, I will probably still send you a message on your birthday, because I don't know, we're probably connected on Facebook or LinkedIn or
Yeah.
something like that. So, I kind of do that. So I think that's very important. Going back to the integrity and ethics side of thing, I think there will always be people um, who don't do the right thing. I try to do the right thing. It's not always possible, but I try to always do the right thing. My wife has a wonderful saying, which is um, always do the right thing even when no one is watching.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a very good guiding mantra. Um, and that has helped me a lot in growing my businesses. It helps me when I'm trying to find funding. It helps me when I'm trying to find somebody who can help me distribute a product in the United States or whatever. So I think those relationships, I can't remember the question now, but I think those relationships are fundamental to.
Yeah, 100%. So I'm going to change the topic more to your personal definition of success. So throughout the podcast, especially the first season, obviously now we're recording the second leg of it, we discuss defining success and how big leaders define success. Now, what is your personal definition of success? I mean, is it all about money, or are there other successes?
It's definitely not about money.
Yeah.
Definitely not about money. I mean, I'm very fortunate that I'm in a situation where I don't have to, let's call it, think about the money side of things, but it's definitely not about the money. Success is being happy. To me, success is being happy. And some people are happy on a very small boat sailing on the ocean, all on their own. Some people are very happy on a mega yacht with 100 beautiful women around them
Yeah.
and bottles of champagne. And so for each one, they might say, this is success. I had a health scare early on in my life when I was 25. So for me, success is being happy and healthy.
Yeah.
My health is extremely important to me. And when this interview started, you spoke about mental health. And I think mental health, and I don't know how you refer to it, bodily health, physical health, I don't know what the correct word
All
is.
goes hand in hand, I think, in my opinion, yeah.
They're absolutely intertwined. So yeah, success is being happy. For me, success is being happy. That means happy in your relationships, happy with who you are when you go to sleep at night. You know, when you put your head in your pillow, it's just you and your head. There's nobody else there. And if you're not happy with your thoughts when you go to sleep, then I don't think you're successful.
Yeah.
Definitely money doesn't come into it. Having said that, the reality in the world that we live in is that one needs a certain amount of money to survive, and it's very hard to be happy and feel successful when you don't have food in your stomach, or your children are hungry,
100%.
or your child is ill and you don't have the resources to take it to a doctor. So I don't want to pretend that I exist in some ivory tower where I'm dislocated from the fact that money comes into it. But I'm saying happiness is to be happy when you go to sleep at night. Those last few minutes just before you go to sleep, to be happy at that particular moment, for me, that is success.
Success, yeah. And it's obviously finding a balance between working and earning money and being with your family, healthy and happy. Have you found that balance?
I found the balance at the age of 56. And that was because I had no choice prior to that. I mean, you can talk to me about work-life balance until you're blue in the face. But the reality is, if you're driven to build a business, and you've taken on the responsibility of employing people who have then taken on the responsibility of renting a flat somewhere that has rent to be paid every month, and they've put their children into a school, then you've taken on the responsibility to pay them a salary that they use to pay the rent and they use to have their children in the school. That's, I don't want to swear, that's a big responsibility.
Yeah,
now,
100%.
If anyone who can look themselves in the mirror and say, well, I know I've got that responsibility, but work-life balance is really important. I think I'm going to go play some tennis. Not an option.
Yeah.
An option. For a long period of my life, I spent 270 days a year in hotels. 9 months of the year I was traveling, and it was absolute hell. No work-life balance whatsoever. It's one of the reasons why I, got married late in life, had a child late in life, whatever. I think work life, it's great to aspire to, but in my case, it was impossible to do. Now, having said that, and in the context of mental health, there certainly will be, for some people who are unable to maintain a decent level of mental health because of imbalance. And in those situations, you have to find a way of rebalancing things. But I never had that option.
And I'm going through the questions quite quickly because obviously we have another 10 minutes. So if you had to give any advice, I'm actually going to talk about society first. So what has changed in the entrepreneurial world now compared to when you started in the sector? I mean, obviously with technology and stuff, it's more modern. How has that changed, and how can we use that as an opportunity to build businesses and earn money from a teenage perspective?
Look, I think what's changed is the acceleration. It's a bit like cars, in 1960, a Ferrari 250 LM went from 0 to 100 in I don't know how many seconds, but it was probably 9 seconds or 10 seconds or something like that, maybe 7, I don't know. But today, that's a Ferrari will do it in, I don't know, 2.6 seconds or something silly. Yeah. So the time to reaching top speed is much shorter. At the same time, the time for things to come unstuck is just as quick. I don't have any advice for anyone in this day and age. I really don't. I think the fundamentals are called fundamentals for a damn good reason. They're fundamental. And it's all about having a great idea, executing really well, building a fantastic team, and making sure you don't fall off the rails.
And I mean, these two questions go hand in hand, but what advice would you give to teenagers who are aspiring entrepreneurs looking to achieve success?
Um, you've got to first develop the skill of gathering information. I don't really, it makes no difference to me if someone's a young person or not a young person when I'm talking with them. I was in Switzerland a couple of weeks ago at a yacht race, and one of the guests had brought along their son. And I sort of, because of the way he looked and whatever, I had no idea how old he was. Literally, really, no idea. I look at him, you could be 12, you could be 12, you could be 18. I had no idea, right? He was a big kid. And we were talking a lot because we were on the boat together, and we were talking a lot. And by the end of the weekend, I thought he was 18. And then I asked his mom, I said, how old is, I won't mention his name. I asked him, how old is he? She said, oh, he's just turned 14. Now, the reason he appeared so much older was because he was asking such interesting questions, and he was genuinely keen on hearing the answer. And I think that a kid like that will go a long way in for instance, building a business, whatever, because he's gathering all of this information and it's all going in here, and then he's processing it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my answer. Develop that.
Sorry, say again?
Develop that skill of gathering information and then processing it. I don't think it's any easier or any harder for someone to build a business from scratch today than it was 20 years ago.
Yeah. And then to end us off, if you could go back and say one thing to your 16-year-old self, what would it be?
Well, I was a naughty 16-year-old, so I smoked and did all sorts of things that 16-year-olds probably shouldn't really be doing. So I would say to myself, don't worry about all the other stuff you did, but don't mess with your body and your brain. Yeah. Don't smoke. Don't drink excessively. Don't do drugs. Don't do that shit. That probably the one thing that I would say, because looking back, that's what could have made me come quite unstuck. And now that I know the importance of health, physical and mental health, I would say that's one thing which young people, you think you're invincible. You drive fast, you do silly stuff. Yeah, don't do that.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you so much, and I really appreciate this conversation. I mean, it will definitely inspire teenagers watching this. So thank you so much for doing it.
Fantastic. And Ben, I have to tell you that I'm actually quite inspired by you, because I think that what you're doing is wonderful, not just for other people, but even for people like me. It's great to be asked these questions. It makes you think, and I think that we have a responsibility to share ideas. It's what part of gathering information is listening to other people, and your questions are really insightful, because as much as they're looking for an answer from me, they also tell me what's going through your mind. So quite revealing.
Cool. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ben. Lovely.